Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Monday and welcome to our Pi Day of Giving virtual speaker series event. Today's topic is wicked problems and other worries of the world. Before we begin today's session, I'd like to start by saying that Ontario Tech University is proud to acknowledge the traditional lands and the people of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. Our university campus is situated on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas, a branch of the Greater Anishinaabe Nation, which includes Algonquin, Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi, and is covered under the Williams Treaties. These lands remain home to many Indigenous nations and peoples, and as a university community, we are thankful to be welcome on these lands in friendship. And because we don't want to forgo this important element of reconciliation, we are also dedicated to increasing our awareness, understanding, and gratitude for the lands we share. And because we're all situated across the province today, I'd like to ask you to take a moment to reflect on the traditional territory that you're on, the treaty that it is covered under, and your own personal relationship with the land. My name is Jody Cowan, and I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator here at Ontario Tech. Today's session is the 6th of 10 conversations we're hosting as part of our Pi Day of Giving speaker series. We are so thrilled to have our Ontario Tech experts here to share their research with you and help spread the word about our Pi Day of Giving, which is meant to raise funds for our students. These sessions are being recorded and will be posted to our website should you wish to watch them again or share with friends who couldn't be with us live today. Now, if you have any questions during today's talk, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen at any point, and we will do our best to get to them. Now, COVID, conflict, climate change, are they all connected? What does flipping a switch to turn on our lights or driving off in a new car have to do with Lyme disease or political unrest and soon to be built cities in Africa? Today's session tries to weave together a few of these key challenges and opportunities that are affecting Ontario, Canada, and the rest of the world. I would like to introduce you to our speaker for today. From our Faculty of Energy Systems and Nuclear Science, Dr. Dan Hornweg. Dan is an Associate Professor and Associate Dean in our Faculty of Engineering and Applied Science. An Associate Professor and Associate Dean in our Faculty of Energy Systems and Nuclear Science. For 20 years, Dan was with the World Bank, including as lead advisor overseeing sustainable cities and climate change programs. Dan was the Chief Safety and Risk Officer for the province of Ontario from 2012 to 2020 with the TSSA. His academic background includes degrees in earth sciences, a master's in environmental engineering, and a PhD in civil sustainability engineering. Dan researches energy and material flows of cities and urban systems. Dan is also a fellow of Canada's Transition Accelerator, the Global Cities Institute at the University of Toronto, and Future Cities at Evergreen Brickworks. He chairs a Region of Durham's Roundtable on Climate Change and is a juror with a WWF Sustainability Community Award. He is a board director with Clean Air Partnerships and previously with Weight Diversion Ontario. So welcome, Dr. Hornweg, and thank you for being here with us today.
Great. Thanks, Jody, and thanks everyone for joining, and hopefully this won't be too depressing. Okay, can you see this? We're good. Okay, so wicked problems. What are they? Where do they come from, and what are we going to do? Okay, so these are what I would argue, well, many argue, are the 4 most important things driving the world today, and where we are and where we're going. And probably the biggest one is urbanization. So in 1921, maybe 1922, Canada became 50% urban. We still like to think of ourselves as a big rural area, a rural country, but we hit this 50% urban way back in 1921. The world didn't become 50% urban until 2008. And Africa is the last region that is urbanizing. Asia is undergoing rapid urbanization right now. And in the next 30 years, we will have as many people living in cities again as we have today. So just think about that. I mean, all of the cities that we have on the planet today basically have to double. The other big thing that's happening, and this is I think a big driver of the issue that we're having with Russia today, what's likely to be happening in China. Some countries are getting old very fast. Some countries still have lots of young people. So there used to be sort of the rich country club in the world, the OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. So Canada, Japan, the US, Europe, and they basically called the shots for the last century. But this century, a student graduating today, 80% of the world's wealth will be generated outside of those countries. Then we have the information digital age, and then we have climate change, which is a symptom, I think. We also have enormous biodiversity loss. And when you put them all together, we get this thing that we call complex problems, complexity, or wicked problems. So what is a wicked problem? And why are they so difficult to solve? Really, a wicked problem doesn't have a solution. We like to think, oh no, there's somebody to blame for the challenges that we face. It's Vladimir Putin, or it's Donald Trump, or it's some mayor that doesn't get it, or some individual, or some company. But it's really not an individual. It's more like this. It's all of us and how we interact. And when you have a whole bunch of humans living together, you end up with complex problems, usually without a solution. This is where we are in terms of wicked problems and where we're going. Okay, so this is another way of looking at the same thing, but at a city scale. So if you look on the left-hand side there, the GDP per person, the world is getting stinky rich and really fast. So money is not the issue here. It's who has the money and who thinks they have the money and how people feel poor or rich. But the thing that's the most important on this chart is on the right-hand side. Look at the number of cities, big cities. So there was one city over 1 million people back in 1500. At the 1950, there were only 40 cities over 1 million and only one city over 10 million. And by the end of this century, we'll have 800 cities over 1 million and 64 cities that are over 10 million. A city over 10 million is like a country. So you probably have heard that expression, the Great Acceleration. We're in it now. And it's still accelerating. We have not hit the brakes in any way. So this year we're going to, well, in 2021, our greenhouse gas emissions were as high as ever. We have not started to bring them down. And the other thing that I think is important, this is sort of the second point of demographics and where we are. Big cities aren't everything, but they're a lot. And this is the 100 largest cities in the world and where they were located regionally since 1800. And the thing that I think is really important here is look at in 1800, Asia had a much stronger role in how the world operated, and it had 65% of the world's large cities. North America had 0. And then you see in 1950, for example, Europe had 34 cities, and then North America had 16. So that's 50 cities. Remember I mentioned about the OECD, we had 58 of the largest cities were in the rich country club. And then look at 2100 and see what's happening. Africa, that's where the bigger cities are growing. Asia will have big cities again. Europe and North America, we are shrinking really fast relative to the rest of the world. The other thing that's important here is just look at the average size of the big cities. So at 1800, the 100 largest cities had on average 170,000 people. By the end of the century, the 100 largest cities will have on average 19 million people. That's a big city. Okay, another way of looking at this, and I only have it because it would have been off the chart. Sorry. You know, we love to talk about how big Toronto is and how fast it's growing. It's true, it's the fastest growing city in North America, but Toronto is basically running in place. Every year, Toronto is losing a place in the world in terms of the largest city. So we were around the 45th largest city, and by the end of the century, this one still says 96, but we think that Toronto biggest city in Canada will not be in the 100 largest cities by the end of this century. And you can see cities like New York going from 6th way down to 22, Los Angeles dropping from 13 to 40. And then you get the rise of things like Lagos going from 20th to number 1. 88 million people to be living in Lagos by the end of the century. Enormous, enormous changes are happening around the world. And these are manifesting themselves in our wicked problems. I just like to throw this slide in and ask if anyone knows where this is. But maybe another way of putting the question is, name the most progressive organization in the world. And I'm sure for all of us, the first place that came to mind was the Roman Catholic Church. Just kidding. This is 2 blocks from the current Pope's home. And so why would the Catholic Church, for the first time ever in the history of the church, elect a Pope from outside of Europe? It's because they too can read the writing on the wall, and they know that where the population is growing is outside of Europe. So this is Buenos Aires. Okay, so let's do a quick little where to from here. COVID-19, the pandemic, is a wicked problem. It almost could have not been a wicked problem if vaccines would have been administered to everybody and quickly, but that wasn't going to happen. So COVID-19 is a really important dress rehearsal for climate change. And the question is, how are we doing with this small, relatively small, wicked problem? Well, the government of Canada has done this first round at a review. And more or less what they're saying is that geopolitical problems are enormous. We don't have answers for them. They're worse now with Russia and China. China was not forthcoming with information. High-income countries have not been very effective at having vaccines distributed in, say, Africa. Canada's federation really wasn't up to the task. We had different data collections across different provinces. We had unconstitutional acts by provinces closing borders. We had a bunch of crazy stuff. We did have a technological wonder. The fact that the vaccine could be created as fast as it was is giving lots of people lots of hope, but technology is never enough. We also saw that much of the day-to-day work fell to the cities, who were often at odds with the province or the federal governments. And this wasn't just in Canada, but around the world. And then we had this whole thing of the anti-vaxxers. And we love to sort of grumble about, well, it depends who you are, I guess. The anti-vaxxers are here to stay. There's always going to be anti-vaxxers on almost every technological issue. And we need to figure out how to incorporate that into the discussion. This is part of why this whole discussion with vaccines or whatever the issue is difficult. 80% of the people representing Canada in Parliament today came from just 4 cities: Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. 80% of the Liberal ridings are from 4 cities. So it's very difficult anymore to represent a country or a province. So you end up having politics of division to a large extent. That's a really big cause of wicked problems. Okay, so the scale of the pandemic really is dwarfed by climate change. Climate change is enormous. This is a graph of where we are. Canada was the only country to pull out of the Kyoto Protocol. We failed. We did not meet that agreement. We did not meet the Copenhagen commitment, and now we have our 2015 Paris commitments that I don't think we're going to meet either. We'll see. We're going to make a better effort at it this time, but we need to go from about 22 tons of greenhouse gas emissions per person. That's where we are in Canada, among the highest in the world per person, down to less than 3 tons in 30 years. That's Herculean. And it's a big challenge. And it isn't just a big challenge in Canada. This is where this whole issue of climate change and a wicked problem is really visible, I think. And this data is a little bit out of date, 2008. The reason you know it's out of date even before you look at the data is because here it says Canada is less than United States per person greenhouse gas emissions. Sadly, no, we have beat the US, not that we wanted to. And I just wanted to show that pie to you in the middle, a pie day. Those three pieces of pie represent roughly the global population equally. High income, that's us. Middle income, that's India and China. And then low income, that's Bangladesh, Mozambique. That's actually the biggest of the three population pieces of pie. Yet look at how much greenhouse gas emissions they're responsible for, 2.5%. So Nick Stern, a famous economist, said, that climate change is the world's biggest market failure. And this just proves to you that it really is. So those who are most responsible for climate change and the impacts that are already happening and are going to worsen, have basically foisted the impacts on those who had nothing to do with it. So this is, I love this picture. This is Betu. Oh, I don't love it. It's just a very poignant, I guess. Betu was taken out of school, he and his sister, and I think it's reflective that they took a picture of the boy but not the girl. Anyways, he and his sister were taken out of school because they didn't have enough money. This is in Beira, Mozambique. And he has to sell those oranges. This paid to take him out of school. He makes 8 cents a day selling those oranges. And he sells those oranges 12 days straight, and then he has a day off. There are about 600 million Betus and his sister who were taken out of school or don't have sanitation, who are from those low-income countries. And you may have also heard Beira, Mozambique. It was the city that's basically been leveled 3 years ago by a cyclone, one of the strongest cyclones ever. And basically, Betu's complete city, second largest in Mozambique, was leveled by the cyclone. So here's a kid. He's smart. He wanted to be an engineer. Maybe that's not that smart, but his sister's probably smarter. Both of them taken out of school. So no education, and they're going to start to learn. He's 13 in this picture now. The picture's 2.5, 3 years old, so he's 16 now. So he's pretty intelligent, but he's got no education and he's got nothing to lose. And he's going to start realizing that, hey, this climate change thing is real. We're getting screwed, and we didn't do anything to cause it. So, and don't forget, there's 600 million of him and his sister. That is a recipe for wicked problems. Okay, so this is another way of looking at the challenge that we have. These are the 100 largest cities in the world. And in order to keep temperatures below 1.5 degrees, we would need to have every one of those cities in that bottom right-hand quadrant, or it's not a quadrant, the rectangle. That is Herculean. Just to get the cities from where they are into there in 30 years' time is a staggering challenge. Anyways, that's what we have ahead of us. And maybe just to take a step back, we can look at, what is Toronto's path to get into this rectangle. So this is from a while ago. It was made it to the front page of the Toronto Star, caused all sorts of grief because it specified which cities were the worst. And this was just, and nobody reads academic papers, to be honest. But this one got picked up and was put in the news around the world. And it was when I was at the World Bank, and the reason it got picked up was because it named the cities. And so somebody at the Toronto Star picked it up, somebody in Cape Town, Africa picked it up, and those cities had disproportionately high emissions compared to their fellow cities. So this was in this paper. And so this is Toronto. And remember I mentioned how climate change is inequitable. This shows 3 communities in the GTA, one in East York, The residential greenhouse gas emissions for this one community, residential only, is 1.3 tons. But look at Whitby, 13 tons. So an order of magnitude more greenhouse gas emissions in a community that, of course, the region of Durham, of course, the city of Whitby, of course, all of the home builders, all of the mechanisms of our country and our city and our province want these sorts of communities to develop because that's how we're making money. But they actually have a tenfold higher amount of greenhouse gas emissions just by the way they're laid out. So, what you buy matters, but where you live matters more. And this is just the same sort of picture of the GTA. And you can see the red around the outside of the donut, I guess. It's just because the houses are bigger, typically, and people have to drive much more. So you end up with much higher greenhouse gas emissions. So I had mentioned in the thing about Lyme disease. So Lyme disease was one of those diseases that we didn't really have to worry about in Canada because it was from the black-legged tick that didn't make it up here. But just have a look at what is in store as temperatures increase. We have our little ticks moving up, and we have Lyme disease. We're going to have malaria, although hopefully we'll have a vaccine for that. But anyways, we have fundamental changes to climate and fundamental changes to what that means for us in terms of things like Lyme disease. Another thing, we hear about, if we get all the vehicles to be electric, well, then we're okay. It's a good start, but we're going to need a lot of metal to make these cars, and we're not going to do anything about congestion if we don't get people out of their cars. So again, the simple solution to transportation, greenhouse gas, we'll just make all the cars electric. The wicked problem raises its head and says, not nearly enough. Okay, so what we need to do in order to address wicked problems and complex problems is that we need systems thinkers. So anybody who's thinking about going into school or whatever, make sure you take some courses or programs on systems engineering, sustainability and systems. And what that is really that we have to look at a problem where we may not have an outright solution. No winners and losers anymore. And that solutions probably for most of our big wicked problems will start to emerge through the cities. Energy and resources are critical, but they're never the only thing. This is a picture of sort of every systems thinker, every systems engineer. This is our idol. This is Dana Meadows, who was the lead author for Limits to Growth, which is a 50-year anniversary this year. And posthumously, she Thinking in Systems, she wrote, which is probably the most important sustainability book I think that's out there. And it's how you look at big complex problems from a systems perspective. Okay, so one thing that she would say is you got to get rid of ideologies and you got to look at the numbers. So things like, we want free parking now, or tolls are bad. These sorts of things don't really lend themselves to solutions in wicked problems. Or technology is, it will always have an anti, whether it's a vaccine or GMOs or nuclear or wind. There'll always be a group of people against it going forward. We've often hear, we need to keep out people immigrating. We need to retrench and have all of our food grown locally and manufacture everything locally. That's not going to help. We also hear, things like energy should be cheap. So we have still this bizarre in the world where we still have enormous amounts of money on global fossil fuel subsidies. And then we, in Ontario, we love to say, these silly people in Africa or Saudi Arabia where they subsidize fossil fuel. Well, Ontario is just as bad in subsidizing the price of electricity. So the price that we pay on our bill doesn't include an $8 billion subsidy that we pay for through our general taxes. So what happens? We use more electricity. Canada has the worst fuel economy in the world. That's a big issue. Ideology, we often hear some people will say, the public sector is good, private sector is bad. Maybe, but not always. And the back of Indigo or chapters, the world needs more Canada. Not if we're going to continue using resources like we do. Okay, and then these are, I just put these on here because we're gonna run out of time today. Beverage conversations that I think would be great on a patio or whatever with a cup of coffee or whatever beverage. I think this Canada urban-rural divide is artificial and highly unproductive. It's a big thing for us. Fastest way to grow or to reduce global population would be to actually increase big city populations. I think that within 15 years, Moscow and St. Petersburg will be more important than Russia as a country. The sustainability of the planet, I would argue, is most determined by cities of Africa, and that a 2060 graduate will be most, or graduate from today, will be most impacted by Africa-Asia partnership. We should have an upper limit on energy and material use per person. And the most powerful way to address wicked problems, I think, is through kindness. So civility, civilization, and how do we get along in cities? And just to sort of to bring it back home, here Toronto, I think we're really at a fork in the road of how do we build a sustainable community? And from a greenhouse gas emissions perspective, we know that priority one is transportation. That's where most of our emissions are coming from. So we need to get ride sharing and electric vehicles, hydrogen trucks. We need to stop using natural gas to heat our buildings. Again, you can see that this is an old picture too, or old, even though it's probably only a year old. You cannot buy a single bungalow in Oshawa for $600,000 today. And then the last thing is we need to keep our electricity low carbon, ideally below 50 grams. So that's it. Thank you. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dan. That was a very eye-opening look at all of the wicked problems of the world. So let's bring it back home for a second here to Ontario Tech. What do you think that we're doing well? And what do you think what else we could do better to create our students to be good global citizens?
So I think what we're doing well is we're addressing the big stuff. So I like the expression little, big, big. So we know that if you want to get to sustainability or to address our biggest wicked problems, we need to get off of fossil fuels. So that's hydrogen, that's nuclear, that's smart grids, all of that. That's what we're working on. And I think that's a big deal. Going after transportation next would be great. And maybe buildings and lifestyles. What we could do better, well, I guess the flip side of that, Canadians still, person for person, pound for pound, use more energy, more resources, generate more solid waste than just about anyone else in the world. And we've kind of given ourselves a pass on doing that, saying, wow, we're a big country, or wow, we got rich by developing resources. I think we need to address that and make sure that basically we need to get rid of that attitude, I think, and become far more conservation minded.
It's funny you say that, because earlier last week we had your wife in, who is the executive director of our Brilliant Energy Institute, and she said that one of your favorite phrases is "there's no such thing as a free lunch."
True. So, she's a very smart woman.
So what are some key tips? Like, what are some cool things that people can implement in their everyday lives to be more mindful and better about our carbon footprint and the waste problem that we are, if we are the biggest producers in Canada? What can we do? What's your call to action for all of us?
So I think first, depending on who's watching, I guess, but I think first, if I was looking to go to school again to figure out a career, I'd want to get in there and start addressing these issues from a substantive perspective, whether that's how we develop new energy systems, how we develop new transportation systems, but done in a way that up until now, to a large extent, we thought, well, if we get the technology right, we're okay. And it never works that way. So transportation, the hardest thing to tackle there is people's attitudes. So for example, the Southern Ontario has one of the worst transportation systems in the world. And arguably, a lot of that is because we're so reluctant to bring in tolls, whereas we should have toll, but God help the politician who raises that. So those are the sorts of things that it's no longer enough to be a good transportation engineer and say, oh, we're going to design this, but you have to figure out, how do I bring the community along? Same with energy. You can't have the best technology if there's nobody in the world who wants it in their backyard. So those are the areas that I think are really important for education, is an integrated approach. Sustainability really is another word for working together. I guess it's two words. And getting there quickly. From an individual householders, I mean, our big stuff is how much we drive, how much we heat our house with natural gas, and lifestyles. So, you know, a trip to Florida will be, if you fly, that'll be 3 tons per capita of extra greenhouse gas emissions. Changing what we eat makes a big difference. And being aware, I think that's the first and foremost, is to be aware, is what does my lifestyle have to do with the environment? And is there anything that I can do to help it? And sometimes the biggest way that we can help is by giving money to a charity, because we're significantly better off than the rest of the world, that we think is working in an area that's particularly important for us, whether it's at home or in Africa.
Right. So someone in our audience says, I agree we will always have antis, but should we also be wary of those who push salvation through technology?
Oh, for sure. I wonder who put that in, but yes, of course. I mean, there's, as I mentioned before, you know, the technology is rare. Having the right technology is almost never more than half of the equation. It's whether or not people are willing to do this, whether or not it provides a convenient excuse not to do the hard stuff. Technology often does that. It gives us a way to procrastinate. So I agree completely that it's, you know, it's not, I don't think it's tech with a conscience is only half of the expression. It should also be tech with effect, in that there's no point bringing in tech if it's not going to get us to where we need to go. And we know pretty well where we need to go in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, resource consumption, biodiversity loss. Those are all very well known. And we just seem to get bent out of shape arguing with each other about which technology to use, rather than somebody saying, hey, this one's not perfect, but let's get on with, you know, moving in the right direction. So that's my big worry sometimes of technology.
So you did mention in your presentation that Canada is really not doing a great job on the world stage when it's compared to other countries on how much we're consuming and how much waste and how, you know, all that good stuff. But is there anywhere in Canada that is doing a particularly good job? And is that a model that the rest of the country should maybe be following?
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to sound too preachy and, you know, Canada bad, the rest of the world good. It depends. I mean, and there is a school of thought that says, well, you know, Canada is only responsible for 2% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, so it doesn't really matter what Canada does. And there is some truth to that, obviously. So Canada may be the most helpful globally if we can start a trend that is replicated by other countries. So, and again, it becomes too easy to take pot shots at others. So, you know, Alberta per capita, and Albertans' greenhouse gas emissions are now about 65 tons per capita, highest in the world. Yeah, more than double the next lowest because of the oil and gas development. So Canada is stuck with having to incorporate those emissions, but I don't think it's helpful for us to say, well, Alberta, you're so bad. We're so good in Quebec because we got lucky with lots of hydro. So I think we're doing, yeah. If there's any better place in the world, I mean, if the question is only greenhouse gas emissions, then yes, then we have Vancouver is lower because they are using all hydro and they're a more compact city. They have less driving. Toronto is pretty good because we have hydro and nuclear. So our electricity carbon intensity is low, but we drive a lot. Then we have cities like Halifax, Calgary that uses coal still for electricity. They're off the charts for greenhouse gas emissions, but then they might be better at things like biodiversity or water conservation. Or this is part of the issue of a wicked problem. If you look to solve it only by who's doing better on low greenhouse gas emissions, then the problem pops up. It's like hitting, whack-a-mole. It'll pop up on, they used way more water, or, they saved all their energy, but they fly to Hawaii 3 times a year kind of thing, and up goes those emissions. So it's taking a holistic view, and holistically, Canada is doing more harm than good, I would argue, globally in terms of where we are on the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's all of them put together. But I think we're making a pretty good effort to try and address them in an integrated way. Whether we'll do it or not by 2050, that's a good question.
So when you think about the pandemic and people not commuting and not traveling and stuff, there was a lot of discussion about the environmental benefits that happened through the pandemic. So what key points would you say we should carry forward as we are hopefully exiting and returning back to the office and people starting to travel again? What do you think?
Good question. So yeah, there was a real drop in global greenhouse gas emissions. Well, carbon dioxide from fossil fuel combustion in 2020 because of the pandemic and everybody staying home and nobody traveling. I guess it gives hope, but global emissions dropped by 5%. So something as enormous as a pandemic that has nobody leaving their homes pretty well barely registers in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So that gives us a good indication of just how big the challenge is. And then last year, because things are opening up, we're back to the level that we were before the pandemic. So this argument that pandemic is going to change greenhouse gas emissions, it's not showing itself to be true. Now, some of the things that I think we can take away from the pandemic that would be quite helpful are less commuting to work, but then not having 5 orders from Amazon come to your house on the same day and say, well, I've saved all my emissions by not commuting to work, but you're buying everything online and it's being delivered by a 4-ton truck to your house 5 times a day. The emissions don't average out. So we just need to think about these things more holistically and more integrated. So working from home is great. Humans are a very social species, though. No matter what happens, we will still find a way to go have a beer with our friends or play hockey or chat about a book or have our kids in school or whatever. That's not going to go away. So, and that's actually a good thing. That's why people move to cities. But there is a lot that we can do. The one thing that we need to learn, I think, most from the pandemic is that we really suck at working together, whether it's different levels of government. We saw it in Ontario. We had municipalities saying, oh, those people from Toronto, yeah, they're all full of COVID. We don't want them to come to their cottage, but we'll take their property taxes, but we don't want you to come to your cottage. So we saw the closing of the border between Ontario and Quebec. Well, that's just stupid. And we also had the provinces would collect health data differently and not readily share it. Again, that's just stupid. So those are the sorts of things that we need to be much better at working together. And they seem little, but they add up to big impacts, I think.
Great. Well, I mean, those are really great takeaways, and I really thank you for sharing your experience with us today, Dan. It's been great having you as part of our Pi Day of Giving speaker series. So thank you.
No, thank you.
Thanks. As I mentioned, this is our 5th annual Pi Day of Giving, where we celebrate the infinite possibilities of students here at Ontario Tech. These past 2 years have been difficult on everyone, and their students are still feeling the effects of the pandemic. So I hope you will make a gift in support of our Student Relief Fund to help students who are experiencing financial need. All donations will be matched dollar for dollar thanks to our Matching Funds program. And our Student Relief Fund has already provided more than $500,000 to students in need. This is in addition to our regular scholarship and bursary program. I'd like to give a big shout out to Scotiabank for their generous sponsorship of this entire series. And thank you so much for joining us today. I really do hope you'll continue to share your lunch hour with us over the next week for the remaining of our speaker series sessions. We've got some great topics coming up, including micro-credentials and what the university is doing around truth and reconciliation. So you can find out more about those talks and their speakers at ontariotechu.ca/Pi Day. Before we say goodbye today, I'd like to share a short message from one of our amazing students here at Ontario Tech. Thanks so much and enjoy your week, everybody. Take care.
There's a celebration going on at Ontario Tech. For the past 5 years, we've been coming together on March 14th on Pi Day of Giving in support of Ontario Tech students. There are infinite reasons why students choose to study here, why alumni are proud to have graduated from here, why professors continue to teach here, and why staff come to work here every day. With your help, we are reimagining our modern approach to learning through the lens of technology. We are delivering an educational experience that meets students in the world we live in today and prepares us for the world we will create tomorrow. Our state-of-the-art buildings provide students with innovative, flexible learning spaces, including collaborative labs and classrooms with leading-edge technology. In these spaces, students can turn ideas into action and make an immediate impact on our world. When you make a gift on Pi Day, you're helping to create future leaders who will contribute and thrive in today's world. You're making an impact that resonates and touches all of us. When you give, we all receive. So this Pi Day, let's celebrate and count all the ways that we can work together to create a brighter future and deliver infinite possibilities for students like me.